Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Book of Nook Show. My name is Kyle Colley and this is a special book club edition of the Founders Talk podcast, a podcast for founders to tell their stories, ideas, and visions of the future. This episode is brought to you by Bookem, the book community's new and best way to host dynamic online book clubs. Download the app and start your book club today at www.bookemapp.com. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. My guest today is the visionary founder, Morgan DeBaun. Morgan is the founder and CEO of Blavity, a leading digital media company for Black culture and millennials. And she is the author of the book we will be discussing today, Rewrite Your Rules, reaching over 100 million readers per month. Some of her recent clients include Nike, Microsoft, American Express, Capital One. She is also the founder of AfroTech. She is a leader, she is an author, a traveler, a coach, a podcaster, a painter, an American Advertising Hall of Famer, a St. Louis native, a mother, and so many other things. Morgan, welcome to the Founders Talk podcast.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
For sure. I kind of want to start with dreaming beyond boundaries. It's kind of a big theme in your book, Rewriting Your Rules. When you were looking back on your younger self, what were some of those big, ambitious dreams you had then?
I wanted to change the world, just like everybody in college. I grew up great Midwestern family, upper middle class in St. Louis, and my parents taught me the principles: hard work pays off, keep your head down, and your work should speak for itself. The challenge is that's actually not true anymore. Maybe it was true for them, maybe it was true for the generation before, but those rules do not apply. People who work hard and keep their heads down don't necessarily make it out. And people who work not that much and do very little to contribute to society seem to be doing, in some places, quite well. So how do you reconcile that, right? Like, how do you reconcile that for yourself, for your family, for your business, for your career? And I think, the beginning of this book was really me coming to that realization that it's on me to define for myself what success is going to look like and how I'm going to get there. And if I want to change the world, if I want to be somebody who is building platforms for millions of people, if I want to be somebody who defies the odds and raises venture capital, I got to play by a different game.
Yeah.
Okay. Because the odds are against me and they're against most of us in this country.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me. I remember Anthony Mackie, kind of from Captain America. He was talking about that too, like that idea of how things, as like kind of when you're growing up, you are told like hard work pays off. But sometimes he was talking about sometimes you need that right person to tap you or put their arm around you and all that. So it's interesting that you kind of have thought about that too, and how you rewrite rules despite of all these odds that are against you. Yeah, so what is kind of to you, what is that world, what does changing the world look like to you, or like being a change in the world? How do you see that? How have you cultivated that in yourself?
Well, I think it's evolved over my career. When I was in my early 20s, it meant building a platform for people to be able to have basically self-determination, like being able to create a space at AfroTech where founders can meet their first angel investor, where people can get a job, whether they were in the tech field or not, and get equity in these big companies that were maybe going to be IPO. And that was my first version of it. I think the second version has transitioned as I've gotten more power and more influence, has been, okay, how do you change systems? Right? Like it's one thing to have this kind of ecosystem that you own, that's your closed wall community, but how do you apply more pressure? So that means working with big companies. That means working with the top tech companies in the world and saying, I think you could do a little bit better. Like, I think you could push this a little harder. I think your products could be more inclusive. I think your stances on equity and inclusion could be stronger. And let me give you the resources to do that and benchmarks to do that. So a lot of the work now has transitioned to being behind the scenes, but for anyone in life, you got to work with what you've got, right?
Yeah.
So now at this phase in my life, I'm thinking through, even with the book, how can I reach more people to help them and give them the tools that they need to be able to affect change?
Yeah, I love that. And in the book, you mentioned that like intensity that runs through your blood. How did that intensity look like when you're younger as like you're growing up?
You know, like I said, I was definitely part of the system. I was Black and gifted, so I was in, all those special programs. I was a chess player early on. I had a chess coach and competitive. Went to competitions all over the country. I was in Taekwondo. I mean, I've always just like
Yeah.
picked the most intense things to do. And I think that comes from like the Midwestern kind of Black American family values. Like it requires a level of excellence and intensity in order to make it, even just to be considered at the same level. And I don't know anything different.
Yeah.
I don't know anything different. My family doesn't know anything different. My son will know nothing different. And I think what I have tried to do is incorporate that intensity with a balance of joy,
Yeah.
right? It's like you have intensity in some areas of your life, but not let that take over your life. And, I talk about that through the book of like how I relocated from LA and moved here to Nashville and kind of took myself off the hamster wheel so that I could have more balance because I was 100%. If it was a pie chart, I was 100% Blavity.
See.
Okay. There were times when you could literally walk down the street and say, "Hey, Blavity," and I would turn around. You said, "Hey, Blavity," I would not turn around today. I'd
No.
be like, they must be talking to somebody else who got a Blavity hoodie on.
Yeah, exactly. And to that point, like you're talking about feeling maxed out kind of from all being in the business so much. And you talk about going to Costa Rica and some of the reset that you had there. Can you just talk a little bit about that and your experiences there?
Yeah, the last section of the book is called Master Your Growth. And it's really about how do you have this cycle of personal fulfillment at every phase of life. So whether you're going through a major transition, whether you just became a new parent or you're switching careers or you're becoming an entrepreneur for full time and trying to make that transition, there's this season of, okay, I've made this leap. I've now gone through these steps. Like I've gone through the steps of starting it up and adjusting to the new life. And now I'm at a steady state here. What do I do next? How do
Mhm.
I keep evolving? And how do I keep going to this next cycle? And so Master Your Growth had talked about how I, during COVID, basically did a 30-day sabbatical in Costa Rica with my girlfriends. And I let myself for 30 days do whatever I wanted to do, like whatever. I ate from the fish man who came by and said, "What y'all want to eat today?" I caught the tuna this morning. I went on boats. I had mangoes. We went chased waterfalls. We drove from one side of the country to the other side of the country. I mean, we just lived it up. And I had never let myself be that free because I had been so responsible for so long as an early entrepreneur. I started my company at 24 and took on payroll and taxes and insurance and lawsuits and all types of stuff at a very young age. And I think this was the first time that I allowed myself to just be a 30-year-old Black girl in Costa Rica kicking it. And it gave me the space, I think, to really evaluate, okay, what do I want the next 10 years to look like for me? What do I want the next 5 years to look like for me? And where do I need to rebalance my pillars?
Yeah, and so for people that are kind of, they may not know they're about to burn out, but they are like in that maybe that season where they need something like that. How did you know that that's what you needed at that time, or was it just like in that moment you're like, okay, this is what I needed?
It was a reward. I had built a reward system for myself because going through and leading through COVID was a lot of effort and a lot of hard work. And I had already felt like I had grinded myself to the pulp before COVID happened. So that was supposed to be the year. Like many people had things that they had in place in the year 2020
Yeah.
um, that didn't happen. So I was like, I'm already tapped out, and now I have to execute through a tapped out situation. So I need a reward at the end of this for myself. Like from me to me, I have to renegotiate my own rules with myself and say, if you make it through this and this business makes it through it, which we did, we had the best quarter ever that year. And, it was a really tough time. We had George Floyd murder, and there was just so much going on. So we really were in overdrive. And we executed a conference in the metaverse. Again, this was before Meta had even changed their name to Meta, right? Like it was a lot of execution in a short period of time. And I had to negotiate with myself. If you make this through this, and when you make it through this, you have to take time off.
Yeah. I understand that. And then you talk a little bit about kind of into those principles. You kind of talk a little bit about your six pillars in the book. How do you kind of like, you talked about stability and freedom and kind of, so how do those show up in your life and when it comes to business?
Yeah, so the six pillars is a framework that basically outlines at any given point you can only be focused on three of them.
Yeah.
The other three you put on maintenance mode, right? Like you are able to have them, but you're not actively, proactively working on them. You're not trying to push them forward. You're not necessarily trying to, hit these goals. You're just like, this is over here. Everything's cool. I'm gonna let it ride. So the pillars for me are constantly changing, and I allow them to change for myself. So right now, my pillars are freedom. I care deeply about my ability to do what I want when I want to do it. Not easy to do with a 16-month-old son, but I'm giving myself freedom because when he was a newborn, that was not an option. So for his first year of life, it was stability, it was wellness, and it was relationships with my partner, relationships with my son. That was it. And everything had to pass through that lens in order to happen. So everything at work had to pass through that lens. Everything people want me to go speak, it's got to pass through that lens. Everything had to pass through that center in order for it to be a yes or a no from me. Now he's older, he's more independent. He's like, bye, mom, I'm going outside. Okay, cool. So I have a little bit more freedom. Now, what am I going to do with it? We've taken some trips, going to Rome, going to spending more time away from the house. I have more time for myself. The second thing is stability. We are in an incredibly unstable political and domestic environment. So it's important to me that I'm doing what we need to do to keep the business stable, to lead through instability, and also for us to have stability in my house. So that means everything from making sure our finances are on point, looking at the risk in the stock market, looking at our cash reserves at the company, right? So I basically just operate with these three pillars. And then when I feel like we're in a different season or something has changed, I reevaluate and renegotiate it with myself.
Yeah, I really love that part in the book because even for me, I think in terms of like how I think of like the four pillars, like mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. Like how am I
Yeah.
kind of taking care of those, even in small doses each day? That's kind of like the train because like if one of those is on the side, then we're going in different directions, right? So I kind of want to keep them in line as much as possible. So like even
Yeah.
hearing that part in the book, I was like, I really resonated with.
Yeah, that's great. Was there any other takeaways that you had from the book? Anything you've changed since you've read it?
Yeah, one of the things also is like think like a CEO because I think with as I've kind of expanded, there's been opportunities for me to figure out how to position people in different spots. So we have a great team when it comes to the app side of it, like the software and all that. But now thinking about how can I duplicate myself as some of the leader part of it. I really appreciated that part as well.
Yeah, it's a big transition going from founder to CEO. So huge leap.
Yeah. And then speaking of that, kind of, I want to shift to like the early days of Blavity. Like, what insights did you learn, like, and notice to get some of those early users and people that bought into Blavity?
Yeah, so Blavity started with Mike Brown's murder in St. Louis. I'm from St. Louis, and I was working in Silicon Valley at the time that I actually opened the book with this story. Where I was working in Silicon Valley, I was working in San Francisco at a very stereotypical office. We had dogs everywhere and beer pong and ping pong and everything.
Yeah.
And I was like, this can't be it. Like, this can't be my life for the next 5, 10 years. And how do I take these skills that I'm learning here and this mindset that I'm learning here and apply it to a group of people that I care about and a target user that I think is important, that may never be the target user of any tech company in the entire Bay Area, which is supposed to be a meritocracy. It's supposed to be the most innovative place in the world. And when Mike Brown was killed, there was a lack of information and access to information for Black people in this country. We were using things like Vine and Periscope and Twitter and Facebook and email lists and text trains. I mean, we're doing all types of stuff to figure out what was going on and the information. The sad part is that I think even 10 years later, not much has changed because the world has changed quite a bit in terms of how information is the algorithms have changed quite a bit since then. But at the time, there weren't algorithms. It was just order of information was based off of time. And so it was still difficult to figure out what was what. And I think when you're deciding to build for a specific audience or specific user or specific customer, you have to become obsessed with what is the problem you're solving.
Yep.
And then you have to solve that problem by any means. You can't be attached to your how. And I talk about that in the book. It's like, are you too attached to how you're trying to solve your problem or your why? Are you too attached with Bookem needs to be an app? Well, maybe Bookem needs to be a newsletter. Maybe Bookem needs to be an event. Maybe Bookem needs to be something else, right? Are we too attached to the how we're going to get it done instead of just focusing on solving the problem? And that has been really helpful as Blavity has grown, constantly just staying attached to, well, what are the problems that we're solving? And then what are the 150 different ways that we could do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, with kind of when you're talking about the algorithm shift, and like how have you been able to continue to sustain a business that resonates with people and keeps them engaged, even despite of all these different algorithm changes and, different people taking over companies and everything?
The key of keeping people's attention and keeping everyone engaged and informed, despite the changes in the algorithm, is about originality.
Yeah.
And good storytelling and original content is going to win every time. Because, especially if you're serving an audience that is chronically underserved in this country, because they will signal boost it. One thing about Black folks in this country is we are going to find the content and we're going to talk about it. And there's going to be a million comments. So we know we're doing well when we have engagement. And that is the main metric of success. It's engagement and it's value. So there are times when we do things and nobody engages with it. We've done events that only 100 people have shown up to. We've done events that sell out 4 or 5 months in advance. So you've got to be able to follow the data, which is another core principle in the book. It's like knowing your data and knowing when your data is telling you something and then deciding to listen to it is a key ability to think like a CEO.
Yeah, I'll say that was another big takeaway when you're getting into all the how to think like think in terms of data and everything too. Like it can be as something from friendships and how do you value those from a data analytics perspective. I thought that was a great understanding, a good way of thinking as well.
Yeah, data doesn't just have to be for business, right? I mean, there's data in every single thing that we do. It's just our ability to be aware. And, I have those levels of data awareness that I talk people through of like, you might be aware that you're being tracked or be aware that there's data around you, but are you using it? Like, do you know what time you go to sleep? Do you know your sleep quality? Do you know like how many macros you're tracking? Like, if you care about wellness and I ask you, how many hours did you sleep last night? You can't tell me you don't care about wellness.
Yeah, exactly.
You just want to think you care about wellness.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, I agree. And then kind of one thing I do admire about Blavity is that you all are like a company of companies. What first kind of got you into MMA for the company?
Yeah, I've acquired 3 businesses in the last 10 years. And when you are scaling and deciding to do something big and ambitious, you kind of have a decision. You could do this really slow or you could do it fast.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, I had no patience. I was like, I want it today, yesterday. Okay. So how do we build with quality and trust quickly? Buying it was the best option because it allowed us to build on the trust that another brand and another founder had built, pay them fairly for that asset, and then be able to take it from there. So Travel Noire was an incredible community that was mostly an Instagram account, and also it was operating tours, events, and retreats all over the world. And they were luxury retreats that are absolutely incredible. And it was an audience that deeply cared about travel. And I knew that travel was an interest group that more and more Black people were going to continue to prioritize in terms of how we spend our discretionary income. So could I build a travel brand? Sure. That could have taken me another 10 years or not at all because there was already something that was doing really well. So, I worked with them to figure out a plan that made sense for both of us and was able to buy Travel Noire, I think in 2017 or 2018. And that brand has grown, since then, tripled their Instagram followers, built a website that's now our 3rd largest site on our portfolio, an incredibly engaged audience that now we're able to bring more travel content to every day.
Yeah, funny enough, that's actually how I found about Blavity too, because I was following Travel Noir for so long, and I was like, oh, and then I learned everything else that you all do.
That's cool. I
Yeah.
love that. when people are like, I'm like, what are your favorite brands? Like Travel Noire and AfroTech. And I'm like, I love that. They have no.
Exactly. Yeah, my brother, he's my co-founder. He always talks about that too. He's like he loves the idea of Phil Knight and Nike, where it's like people don't even know that they're engaging with your brand because I mean they don't know Phil Knight, but they know Nike, and everybody has the shoes on it. Kind of to that MMA point, like there's that weird kind of narrative that like black founders who exited are somehow like sellouts and stuff like that. I know there's that I forget the company, but she sold for like $200 million, and they're like, oh, I can't believe she sold to this company and all that. And I just want to kind of hear your thoughts about that when it comes to founders, because every other like any other demographic, like selling your company is like kind of like what people are like, wow, you did it big, but in Black community, it can be different. So I kind of want to hear what your thoughts are in that space.
When you start a company and you raise venture funding, you're accepting at that moment that you're going to sell and exit this company and that someone else will own it. And that is, in fact, the milestone that everyone is contractually aiming towards. So I think that in our community, that's tough because we don't have a lot that we maintain ownership of, that it makes it to scale, that makes it to that type of impact. And so it can be a tough pill to swallow when it happens. But from a founder and an entrepreneur perspective, that is the contract that you have agreed to once you decided to take millions of dollars from somebody else. And that is clear. Like that is not something that's hidden from people. That is not something that anyone should be shocked by. We should be celebrating the founders when they raise $10 million or raise $100 million or raise $5 million. We should keep celebrating them when they exit because it's the same celebration. So once you start celebrating somebody for raising millions, then you must also celebrate them for exiting because they finished and landed the plane. And that is one of the most difficult things to do against all of the odds. So I get annoyed. I mean, I go to so many people's defense when we are attacked online. Mael and Monique Rodriguez, when she sold, I mean, people went nuts.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this is what you all celebrated her when she raised a private equity deal 3 years ago. What did you think was going to happen next? Okay. So I think that one of the challenges in our community is that we don't know these rules. Like we don't know the game. Like we're not exposed to the game because not enough of us go through the game. So my responsibility and the thing that's in my control is just helping people understand the game. You want to judge it good or bad? That's on you. But this is the game.
Yeah.
So if we want companies to make it at scale, they need capital. If you take capital, you're expected to return it. The only way to return capital is to pay people back.
Yep. You literally, you have IPO or you have your merger and acquisitions, and then, or you're just very much like one of those private companies that's grown so big that you're just paying them out through dividends and all that.
And they don't own those companies. You can be the CEO of a company that you have 5% ownership of.
Yep.
So do we want that? Right? Like there's so many different scenarios that are happening behind the scenes. Do I want a world where there are Black small businesses that are able to become mid-cap companies and be self-financed or have all Black VCs and an all Black cap table and all Black private equity firm buys them? I would love that. I want to be a part of that solution, but that does not exist yet.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, I'm saying sometimes only by kind of like, selling or whatever to get to a point where you can then build out those kind of infrastructures for there to be Black liquidity events that still might go to Black and brown. I mean, what's the founders or private equity?
Yeah, the bigger we all get, the more we'll all have, the more we're able to reinvest back into other companies along the way. It's no different than I've invested in 6 companies as an angel investor. Once I got money, I started giving it away. Like, the real leaders in our community are going to continue to pay it forward.
Yeah. Speaking of community, you founded AfroTech. What was like? How did that become like a? I mean, I guess which became your massive movement for Black entrepreneurs in tech. For those that don't know, what has been your favorite part about building that conference?
Oh, that's a good question. My favorite part of building AfroTech is always what happens after AfroTech. So inevitably, like 3 to 4 months later, after AfroTech, people will send me a DM, they'll send me a LinkedIn message, and they'll be like, I met my co-founder at AfroTech and now we launched this thing. Or like, I was inspired at AfroTech. And it'll be like really random people. It'll be like a celebrity's mom will be like, I went to AfroTech. I'm like, David Banner's mom, like, what are you doing here? Like, she's like, I'm like, why didn't you tell me you were going? Like, she's like, I just wanted to be in the mix and now I'm launching an app. I'm like, let's go. I think it's like, those are the things that I love, is the fact that we're able to bring innovators and people who are the best in class at what they do, cybersecurity, risk, building with AI, and like literal, the people who are building the tools. You wouldn't know their name otherwise because they're not the athletes, they're not raising $1 billion, not doing all this stuff, but they really are building these things that we use every single day. And
Yeah.
they have their whole careers have been dedicated to building the thing, not being a public figure. And so when they're able to step on that stage and share their knowledge, it's just so rich with information that you just can't help but be like, I've got to go build something. Like I want to take action. And I think that is the key to Black economic power over time, is us building more things and
Oh, yeah.
having asset ownership. Now, you can have an asset ownership because you are a senior executive at a tech company and you're getting stock every quarter. Like that works for me too. It doesn't just have to be a venture fund, founder, or be an LP in a fund, or be a startup founder. There's so many different ways to get there.
Yeah, I love that. And speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about one of the parts I also enjoyed was wealth code that you're talking about. What are in the book? What are the biggest financial rules you had to unlearn yourself?
Oh, yeah. So in Wealth Code, I talk about when I met with my financial advisor, I really thought I had made it. I was like coming in with my ego. My head was like this. And I was like, here are my numbers. Like I'm good. And he was like, okay. And what are we using this money for? Like, what do you want to do with it? And I just hadn't thought about that. I had chased accumulation as the end goal, that like just having more money in the bank or more stocks, a net worth of X, like was by this time was the goal, instead of the utility of the money. Like, what is the point of the money? And I think that the truly wealthy understand that money is just a tool for lifestyle choices. Money is a tool for leisure, for freedom, for fun. And I had to completely reframe for myself, okay, like, well, how much money do I actually need? Like, what am I actually solving for? Am I solving for a month in France every summer? Am I solving for a personal chef? Am I solving for retiring my partner's parents? Am I solving for getting my hair done every 2 weeks? Like, what is it that I want to use this money for? And that completely shifted how I move, because now I view money as an unlock to a part of my life that is meaningful, not just to accumulate it for something.
Yep.
That changes everything. I mean, I don't know if it has for you as you've like been thinking about it, but I don't know when people are supposed to be taught to think of money as a tool as opposed to like something to be scared of or something to accumulate. And the difference between being rich and being wealthy is that ability to understand money as a tool and wealth as something that money fuels your passions, money fuels your joy, money fuels your stability, money fuels your wellness. So it's not just getting a nice house and a nice car and being able to wear Gucci. That's rich.
Yeah.
I want to be wealthy.
Yep. I think about, I forget what podcast it was in, but they're like, you vote for change with your dollar, right? Because you're supposed to use your money to create the world you want to see, right? And kind of to your point with that, when it comes to that wealth building, when you're allowed to build that wealth, you can actually implement the change that you want. And I really agree with that. And you're kind of talking about making that shift. So how do you kind of break that rich mindset to shifting to that wealth mindset? Can you break that down and how that works in practice?
Yeah. So the first thing is that there's this misconception that you need to have more money to be wealthy. And I think that's false.
Yeah.
You can be wealthier today with what you already make and spend today, but you have to evaluate how you're spending the money that you have, and what are you putting that money to work in a way that's going to reflect your wealth values. So there's a quadrant that's in the book where it's high joy, high cost, low cost. And you want to spend more time in the thing that brings you high joy and is low cost. So for me, that's a morning coffee, right? That's a like perfectly made matcha. That is having time to go for a walk with my son after work. So what are the things that I can spend in order to have those moments? be more consistent in my weekly flow. High joy, high cost is a month in Paris. Okay. So that's something you work towards, right? That's something that you put money away for. That's something you invest in to make that more of a reality. But in the meantime, I don't need to only work on that quadrant. I need to work on the things and incorporate more of those tiny joys into my life every single day, every single week. And that's how I just generally raise my level of happiness and contentment. It's because I'm constantly fueled with these moments of dopamine, these moments of things that bring me a lot of energy that don't cost me much. It's just a choice of how I'm spending my money.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for people to build that muscle.
Yeah, I remember that. That's a great point too. Like that, the high joy, low joy, kind of putting that again. It's all we kind of goes back into data, but it still helps. Like if you can understand where your energy is coming from in any of those moments, you have the ability to better understand how to present yourself, or like you said, create a wealthy mindset in those moments.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that people get wrong is like, they're following the rules again. Like the rules have told us, you go buy that car, you get that bonus, you go buy a car. Like you get that bonus, you go buy some, treat yourself and go to the mall and spend it here. And I'm like, no, like if you don't get joy from the pair of shoes, which
Yep.
maybe you do, there's some people that just like, they love the shoes, fine. But if you don't really get joy, if you're just doing that because of how other people will perceive you because you have this item, you've got to work on that relationship, because your actual thing that might be high joy might be something that only you can see. It
Mm.
might be spending more time in the, farmer's market. Like you might be like, I just love the farmer's market. Like, or I just love when I have time to cook and bake and give away cookies to my neighbors. Like it could be something that other people would not value as a reason or a place to spend your money.
Yep.
But it shouldn't matter. Right. So like the more you can let yourself move away from how you're being perceived and the judgment of, well, when I hit this thing, how will people know? Because they won't see that I have this big car. Like if you look at me at my house, you wouldn't be able to see. You'd be like, I don't know, she might be doing okay, but like, I don't know how much money she got, And I'm like, I am 3 years away from retiring forever, like whether Blavity sells or not, right? And that's important to me because that means I have freedom over my time.
Yep.
I'm not going to retire, but I could if I wanted to,
And that's what I'm
right?
talking
And that's important to me. But those are choices that I've made along the way. And so you got to figure out what that is for you. And for everybody, it's going to be different.
Yep, that's well said. And to that point, the rewriting your rules, the way you even got into what you call when you got into your entrepreneurship endeavors was different. Like you're still working, you then did consulting, then you were bootstrapping, then you started raising. Like, what is your advice for founders on like managing money and fundraising wisely? Because I even watched your a recent YouTube video and you're showing your pitch deck and you're like, all right, I would have changed this, this, and this. So just talk to us a little bit about that too.
Yeah, I mean, I entrepreneurs are not very risk averse, right? They have a high risk tolerance, and you got to be a little bit crazy to like sacrifice the things you sacrifice in the beginning. And I do believe that there's a level of like just brute force for an intensive period of time in order to be successful at anything, like
Yeah.
literally anything, right? That being said, I think it's important for me as I was growing and building Blavity was to understand that my greatest value was myself.
Mm.
Like I was the biggest determinant on if we were going to get to the next level or not. And as a founder, you have to decide what your threshold of risk is. And my threshold for risk was I need to be able to like eat, have a stable home environment. I had roommates. I was living in downtown San Francisco. I had roommates. I ate avocados, which were very cheap at the time because we lived in California,
Okay.
and boiled eggs and ramen, right? Like I was getting Tupperware and filling it up every day at work. But those were the sacrifices I was willing to make for my comfort level. And because I was young, I didn't have any other responsibilities. You got to decide what your risk tolerance is.
Mm.
What I wasn't willing to do was quit and move in with my parents and live in their basement.
Right.
Like I wasn't willing to do that because it required me to move out of the ecosystem that was the most important, which was San Francisco at the time. So I needed to figure out within my own structure where I was willing to take the risk and
Mhm.
where I needed stability, and then figure out how to make that happen. So, I was trading time and freedom for income, but I kept my day job for a year. Then I quit, kept a consulting gig for 3 years. Even after I raised money, I did not pay myself. I lived in the office. The office paid for my apartment, and my office was next door. And that was what Blavity paid for. That was my salary, was just paying my rent. And we used every single dollar that we made and our first $500,000 in funding to pay for employees so that we could grow the business.
Yeah.
Not everyone want to live in the office, right? But that was my level of intensity that I was willing to give to the business. That was my sweat equity I was willing to give to the business for us to get to the next level.
No, but I was gonna say like, and then we'll switch into leadership and just your writing process too. But I'll say a lot of times with founders, they talk about like, burn the bridges, like focus all in, don't quit your day, just focus on starting a founder. But with specifically when it comes to founders of color, like that, it's gonna look different, right? Sometimes you might not be able to raise that fund right away or get money here. You're gonna have to figure out different ways to sustain the business, sustain your lifestyle, and all that. So I was just reading your story was really good because you get to see those perspectives that you don't always get to see in like every founder's story or book.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's again, the rules that they tell you don't really always apply. And I think I wasn't willing for Blavity's vision to be in the hands of somebody telling me Black was in trend or not in trend to invest in that year. I just wasn't willing to take that risk. That was not a part of my risk profile. So even when I did raise money, I treated every raise like it was my last.
Yep. All right. When we talk about leadership and like hiring, what was your process for hiring? And no, I guess even like how do you even think about hiring and firing and all those things that kind of come with being a leader and building a strong team?
Hiring is a skill. I have not always been good at hiring. And I think for a company to be successful over time, you have to get better at it. And um, even in my personal life, I mean, we have a whole chapter on how to build a team around you, whether it's your personal team or your business team. And the first thing is it starts with you as your first employee, as the driver of the business in terms of growth. Even in your personal life, it starts with you. What are you good at? What do you want to do? And that's your CEO task versus your operating task. Like, what are the things that uniquely are Kyle?
Yep.
What are the things that are unique to you and that is your responsibility? And then what are the things that you're doing because there's nobody else to do them? And there's somebody else probably is better at them than you are. Either you can't afford them or it's not time yet, but eventually it will move off your plate. And having that framework has been helpful for me over time because at every different level, something new is required. When you're running a company of 30 people, it's very different than what I run now, which is 150 people. It's a very different skill set. The finances are different. Our payroll's over $1 million a month, right? So that's a lot of money coming in and out. Like it's very different from when you could close a $25,000 deal and be like, great, that's payroll for 2 months. Like it's lit, like we're good. So I think that when you're hiring a team, it has to be a reflection of where you are in the next level forward. And I used to hire for people who were maybe a couple levels before where we were ready.
Yeah.
And you don't control the timing of when you get there always.
Mm.
So there's been times when I've overhired and there's been times where I've underhired. I've hired for maybe it took 6 months to hire that position and the world changed, but I didn't update the job description.
Mm.
So I think those are the things that I've learned to adjust more for at this level that I wish I had been better at earlier.
Sounds good. Let's get into your writing process. What was the writing process like for this book, and what do you consider like a perfect day when it comes to writing?
Writing this book was a lot of fun. I first actually started the process of writing this book when I started doing coaching and advising to entrepreneurs and small business owners. And I focused on helping small business owners scale to the next revenue level and also build their first team, their first real team, like where we had an org chart and job descriptions, and we were really clear about what they were building for and how they were going to get there, what team was required to get there at that level. And through that process, I was able to refine like my methodology of master yourself, master your method, and master your growth. And also learn what was sticky, like what was actually a framework that was helpful for people that they would come back to year over year, even after I stopped coaching them. And they'd be like, I still do my CEO task versus my operating task, Morgan. I know you're going to tell me to master my data, and here's all my data before you, like literally all of my advisees, they know if they're like, hey, can we just check in on this thing? They know you got to send me all your data before you ask me my opinion. You got to be like, I need help with this, but here's everything that's going on. Okay. And then I'm like, okay, now that I have an assessment of what's happening in a picture, now we can talk about what's really going on. Don't ask me for my opinion without giving me the facts. And those frameworks and having that real life experience of training hundreds and hundreds of founders has gave me the data to say, okay, this is the beginning of this book, because I'm not going to be able to train thousands and thousands of people personally. But
Yep.
this book can be a tool that anyone can pick up in their professional life, in their business, for their personal life, and they can always have it with them whenever they're going through a new life change or something in their scenario has changed. They can go back through all of these steps, and I'm confident that they'll have a successful outcome.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for writing the book because again, it's like sometimes it's really nice just to have a book, like the thoughts and the processes into like a 300 or a 200-page book where you can get all
Yeah,
the information and then you're having breakthroughs as you're writing in the margins and everything. So I really do appreciate you for writing the book as well.
I'm glad it's working.
Yeah,
You're one of my first people. I haven't, it's not out yet. It's coming. It's very
yeah,
soon. It's out now by the time people are watching this. So I'm really excited to hear and see all the changes that people make.
sounds good. Let's get into rapid fire and then I'll end with my final question. What's one thing you do every morning to start your day on the right foot?
Get my son out of bed.
Sounds good. If you could rewrite one rule you followed in your 20s, what would it be?
People care way less than you think about everything.
Sounds good. What are three books you would recommend to a founder,
Oh,
including yours, of course?
yeah, The Lean Startup. I think it's a classic. Certainly Rewrite Your Rules. I think it's a classic now. Um, Probably Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
Okay.
Be the other one.
All right. What's one thing you hope readers take away from Rewrite Your Rules that that will change the way they approach their lives?
They have everything, all the tools that they need to be able to determine for themselves who they want to be and what level they want to live and operate in this world. It's just a matter of making decisions that align with your values.
Sounds good. All right. The way we end this podcast, you can answer it however you want, but what should be in a founder's toolkit?
Data.
All right. Sounds good. Everybody, make sure you get your copy of Rewrite Your Rules. And yep, thank you again, Morgan.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Have a
Talk to
good
you
one.
soon.